wait to get it going. Wait to get it going. So we're live now.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today I get a real treat. This is Boxing Day, as we say in Canada. I don't know whether they say that elsewhere, but it's the day after Christmas, and we're celebrating here. I get a real treat we get to go to Geneva, Switzerland, and talk to a very wonderful friend and very astute observer of international affairs, Alexander Likhotal. And good morning. How are you today, Alexander?
Hello, Mela. It's very nice to see you. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody.
Uh-huh.
And I want to congratulate everybody with the coming new year. And of course, with Christmas that has just passed.
Right. Well, we have to figure out what to do with our year now that we have an opportunity to start afresh and have a good year. So I have some plans, but I think I want to hear more about how you will fix the world this year. And I think we have some challenges ahead. It's not been a very good year. 2023 has had many,
Well,
many
you know,
threats. And
back in Russia, they say that we wish you the 24th to be not worse than the previous one, but
uh-huh.
it definitely better than the 2025.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good wish. Yeah. It's not a very optimistic wish, you know. It doesn't sound like enthusiasm about what lies ahead, but it's sort of like Canadians. I'm an American transplanted to Canada, and the thing that struck me when I first came was that sort of the cautious lack of optimism in Canadian greetings. If you ask people how are you today, the standard answer here is not too bad, which
That's
I
all right.
think is a little low keyed. Uh, so let's each wish each other a fine, superb, thrilling, and an uplifting year, and
Thank you.
just figure out how we're going to make it happen.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you, Meta. You know, I've been thinking about what we will be talking about, though I didn't know exactly the title of that, but I think it's in the air. Everybody is just curious about it. It's the end of one year, beginning of the other year, so clearly it just presupposes some summation of what has happened and what awaits us in the future. So that's natural. You
mhm,
know, I would say that life comes at us very fast. And whether it's an upsurge in the military conflicts, the redrawing of the global energy resources map, or a rapid growth of artificial intelligence with all the risks associated to that, the world is changing at simply mind-boggling speed. And the
mhm.
things look differently. Even I see somebody is getting in. Is it some interference or no? It's okay.
Nothing has shown up on the screen, so I think we can go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, generally, from the situation in the Middle East to the adoption of the electric vehicles, from Ukraine to the treatment of various illnesses, things look very different from where they were even a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And it's difficult to absorb this scale of change because our minds involuntarily refuse to refocus, and they still continue to be focused on something which we consider most important at the given moment. And thus we lose the backdrop and perspective.
Mhm, mhm.
Today, it's of course Gaza and Ukraine. A week ago, maybe to some extent, COP 2028.
Mhm.
Uh, Meanwhile, in the background, we heard that Venezuela held a referendum on the annexation of the two-thirds of the territory of Guyana.
Yeah.
And even there is no direct intervention. It is part of collapse of the world governance today. Whatever is happening, it is the demonstration of the collapse of the world governance. From the Middle East to the Caucasus, to Taiwan Straits, to Latin America, that Pandora box was opened on February 24th last year with the aggression in Ukraine. And the erosion of the world order is taking place not only by violence. You know, the next year there will be elections all over the world, and more voters than ever before will be voting. There will be more than 70 elections in 2024 in countries that are home to around for more than 4 billion people for the first time. And while there is more voting than ever, there is not necessarily more democracy. Many elections will be neither free nor fair. And these elections might further change the political landscape without single shot done. All this,
But can I interrupt to put it even in a worse light? Because I think that even the countries that are democratic, that do have democratic elections, are in have a 50-50 chance of choosing the worst possible government. And I'm very pessimistic about the effectiveness of democracy anymore. That's, that's the worst to me.
you know, Mara, you are not the only one, because I think that we have washed down the substance of democracy. We have reduced it to the every 4 or 5 years voting, and that's it. We have forgotten the true substance of democracy, but let's leave it for the next discussion.
Okay. I don't think we can postpone that one very long, though. I think
Oh,
that
no,
it's a
obviously,
very fundamental problem,
it's true.
Anyway, yes,
But
let's go
anyway,
on.
the erosion, I'm just pointing to the fact that the erosion of the world order is taking place not only by violence. That's important to keep in the mind. These elections might further change,
Mhm.
and they will not only change that, they will even raise more the world situation volatility. The past year has already revealed a deep crisis of the world institutions. The United Nations is powerless in the face of Russian and Hamas aggressions. The OSCE is paralyzed. Hungary sabotages the European Union and NATO policies today, and not only Hungary already. A little over 2 weeks after President Biden hosted Chairman Xi on the western coast of the United States, there was another meeting between the US, UK, and Australian allies that agreed to deploy artificial intelligence to better track Chinese submarines in the Equatorial. Both Republicans and Democrats in Washington warn of the increasing links between Russia, China, Iran. By the way, this is the nightmare of Brzezinski, these nations becoming allies, plus North Korea. And already the term, the new axis of evil, was put forward in relation to this sort of group, like Bush did it after 9/11 attack. In the meantime, the Russian president, Putin, visited United Arab Emirates in a very rare foreign trips, followed by a visit to Saudi Arabia, only to host the Iranian president next morning in Moscow. And it does not look all this commotion was dedicated only to bolstering the cooperation among oil producers. You know, all that reminded me of an episode some time ago, maybe 10 years ago. I was at a session of the Club of Rome, and Sergei Kapitsa, who was a renowned
Yes.
physicist and
Mhm.
he was also a member of the Club of Rome, and he attended this conference. We were talking about some challenges, I don't remember, but given the time scale, it looks like it was already the climate change and something related to the population growth. Kapitz kind of dozed off during the discussion. And suddenly he opens his eyes and says, here we're discussing our issues. And I have the impression that much more ominous shadows are gathering at the back of the stage.
Mhm.
And it, reminded me immediately, not, I recalled that because this is exactly the situation. We're talking about separately Ukraine, separately about Middle East, separately about climate. We forget that all of these problems pertain to the crisis of international relations, and I would say also to the crisis of trust in the international relations. The world as a whole has undergone a great fragmentation during this year, 2023. Many alliances, associations, notions of globality and continuity of relations have been shattered during that year. In that sense, 2003 was the year in which trust between countries faded most precipitously.
Mhm.
Of all the years since the Cold War, this is probably the fastest deflation of trust, not only between rivals and competitors, which would be a surprise, but also between allies, distrust even for collectively adopted decisions.
Mhm. Mhm.
Look at what happens in NATO, in European Union, on G7 scale, G20, which cannot elaborate any final documents already for many years. The entire system of international institutions of the last 75 years seems to be disintegrating. Will the UN repeat the fate of the League of Nations? And who can cope with the growing global chaos? In my understanding, we are now in a situation where we can do very little. Because my understanding of history, how it moves, it always moves from one point to another point. Because there are certain points at which some possibilities or opportunities open up, some options for the development of events appear, and further, due to some circumstances, sorry, it is realized, right or wrong, what difference does it make? And then some choices is made, right, wrong, conscious, unconscious, it doesn't matter, they are made. And when you have made You become a servant for some time, a slave for some time for this choice. That is, you become a slave of what you have made, not what you have chosen, but what has been done.
Mhm.
And there are certain logic after that which is switched on. And as a result, I see today one of the problems that hate, in the absence of trust, hate walks around the world, sometimes lingering in certain places to give itself a free rein. Most often, these places are places that have serious problems with socio-cultural ecology, let me say that word, or moral hygiene. The objects of hatred can be different, and they are. But it is not about them. The point is hatred itself. It's primary, and its objects are secondary.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk about some concrete things. Ukraine today, the war in Ukraine. Lately, for a couple of months, we have been hearing the information and discussions about that. Okay, there is no possibilities for the West to continue its help. It's a fatigue in the West. It cannot continue to help on the level it has been helping Ukraine for the first year.
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
Yes,
I'm
sorry.
getting a little lost here. The last
I'm,
couple of
I'm
months,
sorry that I will be too big on the screen because it's the computer microphone.
okay, but the last sentence about the last couple of months, I'm not sure what I
Yeah,
was
the
going
last
to hear.
couple of months, there is lots of articles in the Western media about the fatigue of the West
Fatigue,
of,
yes.
of the war in Ukraine, that the West is not able to continue to provide the support on the level
Mm.
it used to support Ukraine during the first year of the war. But I think that this is not only the problem of the West, and I'm not sure that it is a real problem because actually there was a how it is called, stalemate,
Soulmate, yeah.
stalemate,
I don't know who our soulmate is.
stalemate,
Mm.
because there is not much dynamic now. Russia has,
Oh,
taken only 20 square miles, while Ukraine has caught 2 square miles. It's negligible.
stalemate, yes.
Stalemate, yes.
I
Oh,
thought you said
stalemate.
soulmate,
No,
and
no,
I
no.
thought, who's our soulmate?
No.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
Okay.
it is a stalemate. In fact, I wonder, it looks to me like in the last couple of weeks, actually, Russia's pulling ahead, looking more like the winner.
It looks more than it is because when you look at the map, we're talking about negligible space. And we're talking about also the tremendous price Russia is paying by the lost soldiers during these assaults.
Mhm.
Now, I doubt that there will be a lot of movement. But in any case, why was Zelensky unable to abandon the offensive? He was insisting, he was pushing all the time. Remember this quarrel of, statements by Zelensky and his commander-in-chief recently published in The Economist, the article. Um, he could not get out of that because of though he understands that controversial consequences were more than obvious. Otherwise, the start of the operation would not have been delayed by almost 2 months. The answer to this question must be sought in the events of the previous 2022.
Mhm.
When the war first started, I told my students in Geneva here that Russia was burying in this war a chance to become a nation. It sacrifices the idea of creation a nation for winning the war. I do not retract that, but and Ukraine was gaining such a chance in this war because it united the nation.
Mhm.
The war split Russia and united Ukraine. I don't retract on that, but nuances have emerged. The problem is that having a chance and using a chance are not similar.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, Zelensky have done a lot of useful, I would say, heroic, important things to repel aggression. But he failed to take full advantage of this chance to create a Ukrainian nation. Why I'm saying that? One of the objective reasons that prevented him from doing so was the tragedy in Bucha. If you remember, that's where the atrocities
Yes.
were done by the Russian army. Tremendous. Comparable to what Hamas was doing in Israel recently. After Bucha, it was very difficult to keep the Ukrainian society from shifting from the paradigm of war with Russia to the new paradigm of war with Russians. The transition was a natural reaction of the society to the horrors of the war. Zelensky could have tried to slow it down, but he decided to support it. I'm sure for political reasons, maybe there was no possibility other than that, but he decided to support and to speed it up. This decision had made inevitable consequences that largely predetermined the further course of the event, according to what I told you about the history, how I see the historical process. First of all, it formed a specific basis for the consolidation of society to fight Russian aggression. He needed that. This consolidation took place not on the platform of citizenry, but on the platform of patriotism, which are close, but they are not the same thing, citizenry and patriotism. The difference is how broad the public coalition supporting it. In a civic configuration, it is a broad layers of society, including its moderate strata. In the patriotic configuration, mainly only the most radical and passionate elements of society.
Mhm.
Zelensky team deliberately bet on radicals and left a significant part of moderate Ukrainians out of the picture. I think that is the root of all that.
You're
Moderate,
thinking of, I'm sorry, the Russian speaking people uh, are left out. Is that the main people who would be excluded from this patriotic thing?
no, 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 it's not about those who are excluded from. Moderate in this context does not mean pro-Russia. We are talking about that significant part of the society which firmly stood up in defense of the Ukrainian nation state and its sovereignty, but was not ready for radical, I would say, Bolshevik methods of its self-assertion. Like, of course, we are at war with Russia, but why break, chairs in that war?
I'm
Why,
sorry, I missed.
why break on the links, everything break.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Uh,
One way or another. But after Bucha, Zelensky took the most radical, extreme position on all issues on the political agenda. Among other things, he outlined um, as the minimum parameters of victory in the war the complete and immediate deoccupation of all captured territories, including Crimea. There is nothing wrong with this goal. By the way, I fully agree with such a goal myself. In Ukraine, half of Europe would jump at the chance to sign up for it today, even today.
mhm.
The question is the willingness to pay the appropriate price for it. That is the difference. Part of society is ready to kill for this goal, more often to kill others, of course, and part is not ready. It was necessary to reach a compromise between these two parts. This compromise was the promise of a quick and victorious war, which provided pain, which was felt as instantaneous, while healing eternal. We return all the territories back to Ukraine. The concept of inevitable and swift military victory thus became for Zelensky not just a possible promise, but a fundamental staple ensuring relative civil peace in society when the authorities broadcast the radical political program of the passionary minority only. It was this circumstance, not liberty or frivolity or pressure from Western partners, that forced Zelensky to take a risk and play the at all cost, let me say, approach during this summer, which this past summer. The problem is not that the offensive failed. War is an unpredictable business always. It is not that the offensive failed. It is that the public staple, the belief that everything will be over quickly, which means that we can endure all the gimmicks
Mhm.
of the current government, has collapsed. And in my opinion, the most serious challenges await Zelensky this coming year already, not abroad, but
Oh,
at home. Either he finds a new long lasting staple for society, or society will say goodbye to him. That's a real problem for him.
well, that is news to me because I maybe I'm not reading the right sources, and I'm just not aware of the extent to which there's internal dissent in Ukraine. That I've heard that he's that Zelensky himself is not recognized as the unquestionable authority on things that he had been. But what you're saying is, I was blaming, frankly, the Republicans because the Republicans are constraining the amount of aid that the military aid that the U.S. provides, and I think Europe so far is still standing pretty steadfast about providing as much as they can. But the U.S. is, I mean, when Zelensky went to Washington recently, he came home empty-handed, I think, and I thought that was the really serious blow. That if anything, people at home will have more questions about his leadership after he shows he doesn't have the support of the U.S. And I don't know what to do about that.
I'm
Um,
not, I'm not talking about only the support of the United States and the West. I'm talking about the trends which are developing inside of Ukraine right
Yeah,
now.
I know you are. Yeah. And that
And
I'm not sufficiently aware of that as a determining factor. Okay.
regarding the popularity during the last year, especially after the very successful offensive of the
Hmm.
Ukrainian troops by the autumn of the last year, it was unchallenged, the popularity and the support of Zelensky. Today, according to some domestic polls, Zaluzhny, that's the general who is in charge of all the operation and who wrote this article in The Economist, has the support of 70%, while Zelensky enjoys 30%.
Okay,
Now,
what are their respective positions? How do they differ most?
sorry, well, the
What does
one,
the general propose to do that's different from Zelensky?
no, actually, there are lots of interpretations, and they are both very smart people. They're
Mhm.
not saying any stupid things in the articles or any public speeches. But if Zelensky is betting only on the radical support, Zaluzhny is trying to broaden his power base and include the rest of the constituency of the country.
Okay. But
So,
in policy terms, what difference is it going to make if he let's say if the latter position prevails, how much difference is that going to make in military terms? What would the general do differently?
no, actually, the general is saying only one thing. Do not expect us to continue what we have been doing, relying on the Western, not totally sufficient, but still quite a large support, that we
Mhm.
will be able to achieve the same results without even this level of support. Because during this year, particularly the second half of the year, Ukraine has been in need of many things which were not supplied.
Mhm.
And that leaves them in a very difficult conditions. No artillery shells, so far, no aircraft, no comparable, let me say, abilities in the air, etc., etc.
Mhm.
Though they are doing a lot, and I hope that this um, shaky situation, of course, you know, that will depend a lot on the electoral campaign in the United States, which has become absolutely unpredictable what's going on with
Yeah.
it. And I'm not saying that if Trump comes to power that he will stop it, or if Biden will continue, he will continue to provide it. There are many options, very lot of options, because the uh, one of the predictions that I've read by a very renowned and a person whom I respect very much, analytic in the United States, he was saying that Biden could easily steal the Trump agenda before the elections in order to achieve victory on that agenda and to demonstrate that constituency does not need Trump for that, meaning the negotiations with Russia. There are lots of possibilities.
Well, I mean, that's a way to cast it that if that Biden could steal it in order to win the elections. That's one way of looking at it. It makes a more difficult way to look at it is they they may in fact have no other option. it may be that people, if the Russians really are going to forge ahead and there will not break this what you call stalemate and actually look like they're going to win everything they go for, then there's no choice but to negotiate. And I have, for me, as a full-time, lifelong peace activist, I find myself in a very uncomfortable position of being really quite a militarist. I'm so much in favor of the Ukrainian position that uh, I'm a real, might say, warmonger. I do not favor a ceasefire because I think that would simply give Russia right now everything they want, and that's a terrible thing for me to have to acknowledge. But that's what I think may be in the works, that there will be a ceasefire and Russia will get, to keep what they've gained, which is what, a quarter, a third of the country itself, Ukraine. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think that any ceasefire in the current situation is the self-suicidal, not only for Ukraine, but also for the West.
But it's going to happen. Well, all right. Tell me I'm wrong. I can't help seeing that for all the reasons you've given me, there will not be the support that Zelensky continues to need, and he will have no choice.
Well, at least on the last day, during the last days, there were some movement ahead out of the blockade which was created by the Republicans in the Congress. And now it seems that at least some amounts, not much, were released in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And also, European Union has come up with a quite promising statements that whatever United States will be doing, European Union will continue to support Ukraine. That's
Well,
important.
that's fine, but they don't have the goods. The U.S. has, I'm making this up. I don't actually know, of course, but the U.S. has the bullets and the planes, and all they have to do is release them.
Yeah.
Europe doesn't, do they? They have to make the damn things. They don't even, they have to build the factories to create the planes, etc. So whatever they say, it's still the U.S.'s game to play. I'm sorry to make trouble for you, Alexander.
No, it's not trouble. We are talking matter. Why you call our discussion a trouble? It's not a,
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
but they're equally disappointing. I mean, both of them are very pessimistic views. We don't see any possibility for a hopeful outcome.
Okay, well, we are entering the year with challenges. And let me know, have we entered any new year without challenges? It's normal.
It is normal, and I think we should just personally, I believe in welcoming challenges that I believe, thank you, God, for all the problems you've given me, because it makes a much more interesting life than that would have been the case if I'd been just told to go lie on the beach someplace. So, so thank you for the challenges, but I don't see a very good solution. And I haven't, to be really honest, I have hardly even looked at what's going on in the Middle East. I don't even want to know. Just don't tell me. All the attention in North America, and I suppose around the world now, is going to the question of how much to support the Gazan, the people who are being clearly abused. I think there are real war crimes there, and how much should be done to help them. And I I just I don't know what to say about it. And you can't ignore it, but on the other hand, I have no solution. What are you going to do
You
about that one?
Meta, I take to heart all the calls for nonviolence and peaceful methods of fighting terrorism. But I take it to heart only from those who have lived through the catastrophe themselves, who have gone through the hell of loss and who have found the strength to transcend the pain and forgive so that innocent people do not suffer. At the same line, I am ready to listen to calls to destroy evil by force from those who left their homes and went to fight with the weapons in their hands, risking their own lives and not the lives of the others. The opinion of others on these issues, including my own, are of no value. We are observers at this triumph of death, which happening in Gaza today and in the Middle East. And this means that we need to limit the unappealing nature of our judgments because everyone thinks of himself as a strategist, seeing the battle from the outside. Unfortunately, more and more people perceive what is happening as a license to hate, again, hatred, not to have the healthy, cheerful anger that mobilizes you to fight the real enemy, but the rotten, pathetic hatred that makes you look for enemies even under your own bed. You've heard about the story that in Russia there was Dagestan, which Dagestan is a small,
I know.
yes, and there was gossip that some Jewish people will be coming as refugees because of all this situation, and there was an opposition, and the demonstrators have taken the airport and they were searching for them everywhere, including the turbines of the aircrafts.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
and
Um,
uh, in the conflict, for me, in fact, in the conflict in the Middle East, it's not difficult to decide who you are willing to support. In any military conflict, civilians die. Sometimes, but not always, of course. Such cases are investigated and the criminals are punished. More often, the sides cling to the understandable slogan war crimes are always committed by the enemy. We only hit combatants. It's the enemy who exterminates civilians. It happens in Ukraine, it happens in
sure.
Israel. But when one of the parties uses footage of the extermination of unarmed people and torture of prisoners as adverts and video reports on its own achievements, this is a very special situation. And I think it is quite easy to determine one's likes and dislikes here, no matter what one thinks about colonialism, the suffering of the oppressed people, or even the worldwide conspiracy of Freemasons. It is called decivilization, what was happening there. You know, a friend of mine told me when it all started we talked from Russia, he called me and said, you know, as soon as I started to understand words, I heard from the TV that there was some nightmare going on in the Gaza Strip. I lived, grew up, grew old, and the TV regularly reminded me that there was some nightmare going on in the Gaza Strip. I've pretty much lived my life, and once again, there is some all-out nightmare in the Gaza Strip. I had to reassure him. I simply told him, buddy, we're going to die, and there will be some kind of nightmare going on there. You know, I don't want to go about what Balfour Declaration, what it made with the all the story, the beginning, and also it will be incomplete because it is also the story of the Bolsheviks, Joseph Goebbels, the Richard Leonhardt, and all of them contributed to the beginning of all that. But I'm also was shocked with the number of uh, anti-Semitic incidents which took place in Europe during that period, with a number of the demonstrations against what Israel was doing there. But equally, Islamophobic hate crimes have also been rising sharply. We have to recognize that as well. So this wave of hate is covering the civilization today. That's what I've started with. And Europe, I think, got a little confused about its values when a tiny part of the globe, which is Europe, which had until recently remained the backbone of civilization, began to substitute values with not very skillfully made costume jewelry. Israel was accused of fighting in inhumane ways, of using force disproportionately. I'm not sure that it is the case. I'm not going to recall the bombings of Dresden or Hamburg, but we are about to bring up now what United States, how it fought in Iraq. Okay, I have looked into that matter and I found a very interesting information. According to the United Kingdom Action on Armed Violence organization, which studies war crimes and not combatant deaths during armed conflicts, they provide the statistics of the world. The average, each airstrike kills averagely 4.5 people. That's an average, that's why 0.5. The battle for Mosul, when the city was stormed for a year by the Iraqi army and bombed by American aircraft, 17.1. The bombing of Raqqa, international coalition against ISIS, 11.95. Bombing of Aleppo by the Russian and Syrian air forces, 21.7. The Gaza war, 0.8.
I don't know that. Not so sure.
That
I yesterday, or recently anyway, I saw an article. I think it was something by Gwen Dyer, who said that during World War II, the bombing of, I don't know whether we're talking about Dresden in particular, but at any rate, it was the whole German population, I believe, one in 160 people were killed. And now in Gaza,
What was the population?
1 in 100 people are being killed. So far more people are being killed per capita, so to speak, than in World War II's bombing of Germany.
So I want you to just mention that this figure was taken by the special report which was provided by the Hamas. The special footnote of this report says the expert state includes Hamas militants based on data from the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health, which counts militants as civilians.
Doesn't make any difference. It's a question of how many, if you're talking about hate, a dead person is called dead because somebody hated him. And that is exactly what's going on. I think.
No. That person was killed not because he was hate, but because of that. He has raped somebody's wife. He has opened the stomach of the pregnant woman during the attack on Israel. They were crimes and they were videoed and recorded by themselves.
Well, yeah, all right. But I mean, honestly, I can't, I have started off by saying I can't even get into this issue because I'm so appalled by both sides. But having said that, I cannot justify at all the amount of the imbalance that is really being seen in the current um, violation of the human rights, frankly, of the Gazan population. I mean, I don't know. We got to find a different solution. This is not something I can support.
Well, that pushes me only to one proposal. We should make a special recording of the discussion of the Middle Eastern situation.
I'm not confident because I told you I don't even read the paper really. I hardly I don't even want to think about it because I can't support either side, and therefore I just um I all of the talk about what to do about the Middle East just seems totally futile to me. It's hard enough to talk about, as we'd been talking about what to do about Ukraine, but any discussion about the Middle East now starts with the recognition that neither side is going to give 1 inch, and they want to go on fighting. They're just going to do it. So I think, well, go for it then, guys. If you want to kill each other, I can't stop you. And that's not the point of view that I want to defend as somebody who's supposedly concerned about peace.
But
Um,
I
so,
have, among my students this semester, which was finished, I had one student from Israel and one student from Saudi Arabia. And when the hell broke out, I mean, when it all started, I was just, thinking, okay, how can I just make them discuss them? And we found the solution. They talked. I wouldn't say that they became friendly, but at least they talked
mhm.
because they were rational and they were listening to the arguments and they understood that to act and discuss this situation on the basis of emotions is not the way forward. And also, we have to think in terms whether all the necessary options were offered in order to cure this situation, or rather vice versa. And I think I'm afraid. The problem was that we not only tried to resolve the problem, but in reality, the international community has exacerbated this problem. I can give you,
Mm.
um, you know, we're talking about the collapse, or at least, the crisis of the United Nations. I think that it's not only the crisis. I see that the United Nations has changed from the organizations that prevents conflicts to an organization that makes them permanent. And we can be firmly sure that if there is a problem in the world and the UN allocates officials to fight it, it will become permanent. You want an example? The problem of hunger in African countries. If an African country sits on a food program of the United Nations, there is no way that African country will ever get rid of hunger again.
We'll get rid of what?
It will never get rid of hunger again. With the UN, the situation is that since 1948, there have been people called Palestinian refugees. 1948. And instead of solving the Palestinian refugee problem, in such a way as resettlement in the same Jordan, which speaks the same language and is made up of the same Palestinian Arabs, the problem has been magnified many times over and made perpetual. I'll give you another
But
example.
yes, but how? I'm sorry. How do you say that came about? What? Who did it? Who's the bad guy here? I don't get it. It's certainly true that the Palestinians, for example, most of them, I guess, live in Jordan. Uh, but I don't know whose fault that is. Could it have been changed? Yeah, if Israel had let them back home. But what else could have been done? I don't know.
It's the decision of the United Nations. I'll give you another example. I recall from history, between 1944 and 1946, 1.5 years ago, there was a gigantic ethnic cleansing and forced relocation of peoples in Europe during the end of the war and after. Somewhere between 14 and 16 million Germans alone were resettled,
Mhm.
including from the Sudetenland. They, they were resettled. If I'm not mistaken, more than 1.5 million Poles from Galicia and 500,000 Ukrainians from Western Volhynia. I may be slightly wrong with the figures, but the level is this. Nowhere do we see people who fled East Prussia to live now in refugee camps in Germany and whose posts are inherited, who exists on UN money and tell us that they have a sacred right to return to the territory of the Kaliningrad region. But simply United Nations was not there. And I'm sure that if UN was involved in the problem of the division of Germany, there would have been two Germanys up until now.
Well, I hate to find myself on a different wavelength than you. I really respect you so much. But honestly, the expulsion of the Palestinians from their home, I can't just ignore that. I can't say that that was an okay thing. I can't accept that we should just treat that as, I mean, it's true, the American Indians have lost the country, it is true that the Canadian Aboriginals do not have much in terms of ownership of the land. I suppose my apartment must be on Indian territory or Aboriginal land, etc. But that is past. We have to start over and assume that the injustice that was done there is over, and we have to accept it as a done deal. But I can't take the same attitude when it comes to the expulsion of the Palestinians. It's uh, the recognition of the injustice seems
But
to me,
who expels now?
without being acknowledged, it's pretty serious.
Meta, who expels Palestinians now from Gaza?
Sorry?
Who expels Palestinians now? You say that you cannot accept when Palestinians are expelled from
Well, they
Gaza.
were expelled in this thing called the Nakba. I saw a video once that a film that was made in those days when the Israelis came in and just I saw all these people from the villages, the Palestinians, just being forced out of their homes and fleeing. And this has never been acknowledged as the basis, the way that Israel has was founded. And it's, I can't just ignore that.
No,
That
you can't, and I can't, but this is the not simply true. We forget the reason. The Israeli army comes to the region and says, we start the military operation because we have here Hamas who has committed an aggression and it is hiding under you in the tunnels, etc., etc. This will be bombed. We do not want you to get hurt. Please relocate to the south.
Yeah,
Provide
and tell them where to go, and when they go there, they bomb that. That's the most within the last couple of days. There's clear evidence that the place where they forced people to go is exactly the place that they attacked and killed many, many people. I'm not I don't even want to defend the Palestinians in this case, the Gazans. I can't, but I certainly can't justify what Israel is doing.
I can, they are doing practically what Ukrainians are doing now. They're defending their homes because they were attacked.
But by all notions of proportionality, a just war requires some kind of proportionality, and this is disproportionate. It's not the number of people they're killing, the civilians who are being killed.
Mera, we should
It,
agree that we disagree.
yes, we have to, I'm afraid. On this
That's
one,
normal.
we
That's
do.
normal. That's normal. I also do not bless everything which is done by Israel, but I do understand what what happened there, what is the history of this conflict, and I understand what is the psychology of that, of the people in this situation. I have full sympathy to Palestinian people. I have friends there, but they are not guilty. They are not guilty. I mean, rank and file Palestinians are not guilty of that. But Hamas is guilty. And clearly, Israel wants to create safeguards against the repetition of this story in the future. How it is doing, I think it's a delusion. I do not believe that they will be able to exterminate Hamas. And even if they will, I am afraid something more monstrous will come on the place of Hamas. Therefore, the problem should be dealt not on the basis who is guilty and who is not, who wears whiter gowns and who does not. I think this situation deserves absolutely new discussion and not within the United Nations format. It should be done on a new platform. And here we come to the question from which we start and which we have never covered in this discussion. I mean, the new world order. Only within the new world order, which is not dominated by the geopolitical interests of several countries, this issue will be amenable.
Well, we keep going to talk about the New World Order and about your notions of how to create new structures for the world order. And every time we start to talk about it, we get into more immediate political issues. I'd like to have that conversation, but mostly I want to hear and think about how to restructure the organizations that are supposed to keep peace globally. The United Nations, I think, actually really needs an overhaul or at least some additional institutions and with some power. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what we need to build into the system there that maybe work better than what we have now. So let's find another day to talk about that. Okay.
Sure, with pleasure, Nana. And
Okay.
it's always great to talk to you.
Okay, it's been wonderful to get together back with you, and even if that does mean we find ourselves on opposite sides of an issue,
No,
we're
we're on the same. We're on the same. We're on the side of peace, but
indeed.
we see it differently.
Yes. Thank you so much, Alexander, and I hope
Thank
you have
you.
a happy New Year celebration. We still have a couple of days left in this year, but let's work
Yeah,
toward the
yes.
elaboration of a much happier 2020.